All right, we're being joined right now by Steven Espinoza. He's the Showtime Sports President. He's the boss man. Makes a lot of important decisions. Always love catching up with you, Steven. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Doing good. Busy over here at John Boy offices. We got a big blitzball tournament coming up. It's not just boxing for us over here. Play a lot of different things over here, but the boxing world is heating up. We got a lot of fights being announced. We have a lot of fights coming down the pipeline. And I'll start it off with what everyone wants to know, and that is Showtime Boxing going anywhere?
Uh, no, I understand. Look, there's been a lot of change, a lot of candidly bad news throughout the media industry and to some extent throughout the economy. But the media industry and the TV industry in particular is undergoing a fair amount of change. We're not immune. Um, Obviously, the Showtime streaming service is consolidating into Paramount Plus. But in terms of Showtime Sports, and in particular Showtime Boxing, um, nothing has changed. As we sort of, as you can conclude from the recent schedule, we're full speed ahead. We've got the green light to continue what we've been doing, and I think that's evident from what we've scheduled this far. It's a really robust schedule. We're in the middle of 8 straight weeks of combat sports, and boxing action in particular. And it's as busy a run and I think as solid as run as I've seen in quite some time here. And that's even without adding on some of our bigger stars who are going to be added on early in the summer, like the Charlos and Spence and others.
Yeah, it is quite a run, man. What is it, 8 fights in 9 weeks or 9 fights in 10 weeks? Some really good ones in there. Um, can you try to explain? Like, it's hard for some fans to understand, or it's hard for boxing fans to understand what this merger really means. Is there a way you can explain it in like sports terms for the sport fan?
Um, Sports terms. Look, I think it's and look, I'll try to make a sports analogy and probably do a better job with a media analogy. It's and I believe it's Fenway Sports Group. The sports entity that
Yes.
LeBron's a part of. That is an ownership group that has a number of different brands underneath it across different sports. European soccer, obviously, the Boston Red Sox, various sports properties under one brand. They're sort of run independently, but they have some of the shared administration and obviously are done cohesively. That's the sports analogy. The media analogy is probably Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And they're probably the best example of being able to sort of groom and cultivate and have multiple brands thriving under one app. So that's the simple terms of what's going on. Now, look, there obviously is some economic distress in the business overall. There have been a lot of layoffs across the industry. There have been some changes within our company, and that probably has caused some questions overall. But the reality, for us in sports, it's full speed ahead, and we are continuing to do what we've been doing, which I think it's fair to say is putting out, I think, the best domestic schedule there is in the sport.
Now, in terms of like the fights in let's say next year, what it looks like. So you're gonna have an app next year. It's gonna call Paramount with Showtime. That's how we're gonna be watching Showtime Boxing in
Right.
the year 2024.
Yeah. It's sort of like, if you want to watch Hulu, you want to watch Marvel movies, you go in the Disney Plus app.
Yeah,
If you want to watch, Showtime and all the Showtime content or stream boxing, it'll be within the Paramount Plus app.
and then there'll be like a boxing section.
Yeah, well, there'll be a Showtime section because there's obviously a Paramount Plus subscription without Showtime, or you can have Paramount Plus with Showtime. But yes, there's a sports section, and in it we'll have side by side all the great offerings that Paramount Plus and CBS Sports have, along with if you've got your Showtime subscription through there, the Showtime offering as well.
So obviously the PBC has such a big roster, and it pretty much is boiled down to a lot of the fights ending up on Showtime. They're no longer on Fox for the most part, no longer on FS1. Could we see more dates now with a streaming service like Paramount being in the loop with Showtime, where we would see some of the fighters that we're only seeing maybe once a year? More dates. Are we going to see more dates now with Paramount Plus in the fold now?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think the issue of dates isn't really so much in terms of networks as it is, other factors. Everyone has been asking where Jamal Charlo has been. People are anxious to see him back.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he isn't back has nothing to do with the amount of dates. He had an injury, went through some personal stuff, and he's anxious to get back. But I think, look, if we look at it, we've got on our calendar already 14 boxing events in the first 6 months of the year.
Yeah.
Again, that's as busy as I can recall us being since I've been here, which is over 10 years. And I think there will be plenty of dates. Now, whether that expands further as we sort of become part of the Paramount Plus and CBS Sports ecosystem, that remains to be seen. I'd certainly think that there's an openness to discuss it if there's an opportunity there.
I was thinking more like shows that we would have seen on FS1. They're not like top guys. They're like contender types of series, stuff like that. I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that's possible, and I think we could be seeing some extended distribution of sort of the streaming fights, additional Paramount platforms. There's some really good fights. I mean, this past weekend we had Trayvon Marshall, we had Terrell Gaucher.
Yep.
Two interesting fights, interesting names on the stream. And so, if anything, with all this talent, that stream is as good as anything on air. The names there and the fights there are as good as most other televised undercards on other networks.
Yeah, it is nice the emphasis you guys put on the undercards, having Campbell in there and Luke Thomas calling them, and having access for fans to watch those fights that are the first couple fights on the fight card, where I think fight fans really do appreciate that. So obviously there's a big commitment to boxing this year, 2023. I think it's the Beyond that has some of these bad reporting or some questions and all that, but can we say that we will see boxing on Showtime in some form after 2023?
Yeah, certainly that's our expectation. No one has told us any different. I think there's a lot of people out there with agendas in particular, or they're trying to connect, dots that aren't really going to be connected, and it's a little bit like reading the Fed minutes or listening to the Federal Reserve make statements. It's sort of like everybody hangs on one or two words or a particular phrase and tries to parse what that means for the next year.
Yeah.
The reality here is we are as busy as we've ever been, and that remains the case for the foreseeable future.
It must be pretty frustrating for you to read some of the tweets. You're on Twitter. You're in the trenches, seeing some of these reports or seeing some of these people who think there are authorities on things, and you're just like, I do want to respond. You do respond. Like you will snipe in, but you're probably like, oh man, I really want to just hit everyone on Twitter right now and just be like, guys, like we're gonna be fine.
Yeah, I probably respond more than I should.
No, it's relatable. You're in the mix. It's good.
Yeah, I think there's some, but also you don't want to feed just these weird conspiracy theories or people, like I said, who are clearly rooting for us for some reason, not to go away. I think we're playing a critical role in the sport right now. And as a boxing fan, I sort of shudder to think what the boxing market would be without our activity in it, because we are providing some of the biggest fights and a lot of high quality content here. So it's sort of like, yeah, you have to consider the source. The knowledgeable people can sort of see the big picture and understand that there are changes, but there are also indicators that the sport is doing very well with us. We don't come out with a schedule like this. We don't continue to add to it if there's immediate concerns about what the sport is doing for our business.
So, but you're saying is Rick Glazer not a reliable source?
Who
is that guy? I mean, I think I've seen him once at a fight when I was like 15. And my dad was like, stay away from that guy.
I've heard rumors of him. Actually never run across him.
Yeah, he might be a figment of our imagination. He might be a burner account for all we know. Let's get into the schedule. It's a fun one. This past weekend was a great triple header. All three fights were amazing. Now we go down to Australia. Tim Tszyu, Tony Harrison. That's one of the bigger fights that I love on this rollout. Then we got Benavidez Plant 2 weeks from Saturday. I can't believe that fight snuck just sneaking right up on us. Sebastian Fundora was always in really fun fights, and then Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we have some fights. Rolly Romero's back, and then Adames coming back. That's a pretty robust schedule, and it's a little bit of something for everyone. We got pay-per-views. We got big fights with high stakes. We have a guy in Tony Harrison stepping up to face Tim Tszyu. There's a huge implications in that fight. The winner probably we'll see Jermell Charlo. Fun schedule. I think it's got some really good names on it.
Yeah, look, I want to revisit this past weekend because on paper it looked like some really interesting fights, and it's always gratifying when what you see on paper actually plays out the way you hope it will. And in particular, one of I think what boxing fans enjoy most is discovering that new talent. Is finding it. And Elijah Garcia came into the fight with a little bit of buzz, a lot more buzz now. That is a high quality win for someone as young as he is, and it's the kind of performance that immediately sort of stamps him as somebody to watch, going forward. And we've seen that happen, many times in the last couple of years, whether it's somebody like Isaac Cruz or like Jose Valenzuela or Chris Colbert or even Stephen Fulton over the last about 18 months. So look, that's sort of high praise for Elijah. I realize it's just one fight, but I think he's really, really promising. I mean, you could say the same thing for Armando Resendiz. And the fact that he put on that kind of performance, I thought Jared Hurd looked pretty good. He's just, outworked by a very, very tough Resendiz. And, not a lot of people knew his name coming into the fight. But again, it's the type of performance that makes you want to see those guys again.
Yeah, especially the middleweight division. It's just like, I talk about this all the time with my co-host Chris Algieri. It's like the middleweight division forever is the glamour division in boxing, and it's right now it's a lot of it's got a lot of movement. You got Golovkin. What's going on with him? We obviously haven't seen Charlo in a while. I know he will be coming back this summer. You got Janibek in there. There's room to move in the middleweight division. I think a lot of guys are circling some of the names on there. Let's talk about Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. How close was this fight to falling through?
I never thought that it was really in jeopardy since we reached agreement, back in the fall. I mean, obviously there were issues that needed to be ironed out. There always are. I was a little puzzled by all the public discourse and sort of the statements that sort of we all, I may say we, the promoters and the networks and the fighters, all got to a point where we had an agreement in principle such that everyone was comfortable with the fighters coming out and saying that we're in agreement, fight is on.
Yeah.
And then immediately you saw some of those same people who had approved the announcement start saying, well, wait a minute, we're not done, which was sort of puzzling to me. It's sort of like we all agreed that, fight was on and the fighters were going to say it. And then to hear people casting doubts from within the process immediately after that was sort of surprising and puzzling to me. But there were details to be worked out. Look, I'm not a fan of sort of the minute by minute, day by day updates on the negotiation. I think it puts a strain on the negotiation. Yeah. I realize fans want to know. I know that there's, developed a little tradition within sports. Part of the sport is actually understanding the business and following the business and some of the melodrama behind the scenes. I get that. But I think in this case, it was a little bit too soap opera. I think there was too much melodrama. I think I never felt that it was really at risk.
Yeah.
And in particular, I didn't think he was at risk because both Tank and Ryan were 1,000% committed to making the fight happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say this felt like the fighters really drove it. Like they were not gonna get out of that proverbial room. I know they weren't in a room together until it was made. They weren't gonna let anything stop it, and I think they should be applauded for that. Like especially like obviously Tank is way more established than Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia, I feel like, does not need to take this fight right now. He's the one that has like what 2 fights in the last 2 years, not on the same level as Tank in my opinion. He really pushed for this fight, right?
Yeah, I mean they both did, and there were multiple points where either of them could have gone in a different direction, and it would have been a repeat of Spence Crawford,
Oh God.
with someone sort of leaving the process before it's done. But neither of those guys really ever entertained that. They were committed to the process, and I believe that's the right choice. It's the right fight at the right time.
Yeah.
It isn't late. It isn't early. This is the right time for this fight to be happening.
Oh, it's 100%. I mean, this is like almost the anti-Mayweather Pacquiao. From a fan's perspective, I know from an executive standpoint, that was a wildly successful fight in terms of the money that it generated. But if you look at just like the fight fan, like they want to see 2 undefeated guys that are under 30, fighting, taking risks, getting in there and getting it on. Me and you have done a bunch of interviews on this topic, and you have said in the past, like, it's a big fight. We don't feel like DAZN needs to be part of it. They are a part of it, but I feel like that aspect of the deal, and I know that there are some fans out there that follow along with the business side of things. What is DAZN's involvement in this? Is it going to be 2 separate pay-per-views, not a joint pay-per-view, correct? And what is DAZN's?
It's not a joint pay-per-view. Essentially, they're helping distribute and sell the fight. It will be Showtime pay-per-view production. It will look like Showtime pay-per-view. It'll be Showtime pay-per-view announcers and the talent. You'll just be able to purchase it through the DAZN platform as well. So that seemed like an appropriate result, in that they got more participation than they would otherwise have gotten. I mean, it's certainly not solely Showtime pay-per-view in terms of the distribution. They are one of the outlets that'll be selling that. So I think it was a at least from my perspective, a good compromise.
Yeah. Was that so? It's not going to be like a DAZN telecast. Like you're not going to see Mannix on it, or you're going to see great. Like they're going to have their guys.
As much as I like Chris, you'll be seeing Jim Gray and the others.
Oh, Chris was in Creed. Did you see Creed 3 yet?
I did see Creed.
Let's get your official review of it.
Well, first of all, as a business person, I thought their promotion was tremendous.
Yeah. It's breaking all sorts of records,
and it was everywhere. I mean, no matter where you turn, whether it was sports TV, non-sports entertainment, those guys in particular, Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan, worked their tails off in terms of promoting it. Yeah. So good for them. And the story, I thought it was solid. Look, Michael B. Jordan is someone who is really committed to this. I don't know if he was a boxing fan before all these films. He certainly is now.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's got an appreciation for the sport, with the care in which he handles it.
Yeah, that's what I came away with. A lot of things. Like I thought it was really good. I came away with like Michael B. Jordan respects boxing, because he's not just like parachuting in and out, like using the Rocky franchise. You can tell he cares. I like to see Showtime was in it. They had the all access. I thought that was pretty cool. Had ESPN in it. They had DAZN in it. They played nice. They had everyone in it.
Yeah, there was, and David Benavidez in there. Like there's good amount.
Yeah.
Obviously Crawford in there, Lopez.
The only thing I didn't like is, and this comes with boxing movies, like Jonathan Majors' character, professional debut. He's fighting for the heavyweight title.
Yeah,
but like I kind of have to roll my eyes. I saw it with my girlfriend, and she's like, "Does that really happen?" I was like, "No, that never happens. We'll never see that."
Unless you're Francis Ngannou, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. He might be coming into the boxing world. ESPN is reporting as of today that Spence and Crawford are now negotiating directly over the phone. This is nice. They've agreed to a purse split on the phone. They're going to take interim fights, though. Have you heard of this report and any truth to it? What's the latest? I can't do an interview with you if I don't bring up Spence and Crawford.
Actually, you're breaking news to me. I've been on phone calls all morning, so I hadn't seen that news.
Yeah.
You know, look, I think the less that's said, the better. I mean, obviously, there was a full attempt to make this last fall,
Hmm.
and it didn't quite work. I think the quieter it is and the less we say about it, the better. But that report is out there. I know that there have been attempts. They never really stopped. I mean, obviously, um, Crawford went and did the Evanesian fight. Spence, attempted to take another fight, which got derailed by his car accident. But there have been, no one has given up. No one in the process has given up. So I think those reports are sort of premature, significantly premature. But there have been ongoing discussions, and I think, look, if this thing um, were to not happen, I think everyone in here, and certainly my feeling, and I think a lot of the Spence side, if it's going to fall apart, no one's going to let it fall apart until they feel like they've exhausted every possible avenue
Yeah.
to get this done. So, yes, it's been dragging on for a long time. Yes, people are frustrated, but the fact that there are still discussions shows that people are persistent. They realize the value of the fight, and there's still a lot of effort going into getting it made. So, I'm hopeful. I haven't seen enough to say I'm optimistic yet, but I'm hopeful.
Okay.
And certainly, as long as people are talking, there's still a real chance this could happen.
When is like someone like you, the network? When do they get involved in these negotiations? I know most of it's between the promoters and whatnot. When do you kind of come in and say, "Hey, I'm in here, the closer. All right, let's get this done."
Um, we come in whenever we can be helpful, and sometimes that's early on, either as sort of bringing the parties together or sort of acting as a go-between, or if there's a financial role or some other aspect that we can be critical in providing. There's some gaps that we can fill in. So again, I don't want to go too far into the discussions.
Right.
I think there are parts of this that we can be helpful in, and that we have been helpful in sort of answering questions and providing some potential solutions to some of the challenges. But again, we don't not going to be part of it just for the sake of being part of it. If we're going to be involved, it's because there's a role for us to play and there's a contribution to help the process get to conclusion.
So you 10 years now at Showtime, which is crazy. 20 years in boxing, which I always say boxing's like dog years, so you can like times that by 7. So you've been in boxing for a long time now, Stephen. What is one thing you love about the sport, and what is one thing that drives you crazy about boxing?
Um, One thing I love about the sport is, look, I think it's an obvious answer. I think this is probably it for boxing fans. It's sort of the fight night feeling.
Yeah.
I'd say that's one of my top two things is one, and I've been fortunate enough to be at a lot of high levels sporting events, from Super Bowls to Final Fours and other things. To me, there's really nothing like the feel of a big fight night, whether it's Vegas or Barclays Center or otherwise. It's just a different adrenaline. It's a different energy that night, and I think any real fight fan who has been fortunate enough to be at a live event probably feels the same way.
Yeah.
And the other is the long term process, is to see Deontay Wilder go from sort of a somewhat skinny, awkward kid that we were, taking a chance on,
Yep.
and doing some local fights in Alabama and otherwise, to see him become, champion of the world and headlining pay-per-views. Or Tank Davis, to see him go from, fighting off TV as someone who looked like he was, probably 14 or 15 years old, to now being one of the biggest names in the sport. I think the difficulty or the one thing I'm not a fan of is the negativity.
Yeah.
And criticism where it's warranted is absolutely fine. And I think self inspection, being introspective about all of our roles in the sport and the sport overall is a great thing. But there's sort of, and I've said it to you before, It seems like boxing fans are a little bit more maybe cannibalistic than a lot of other fans. I'm not saying that we need to put on a happy face and pretend everything's okay, but I think we're a little bit more of, maybe they're traumatized, maybe we're just a little bit more critical, but I see a lot of negativity around the sport at a time when there's a lot to be positive about.
Yeah, I try to highlight the positives, and I get called an optimist, like too much, which I think is ridiculous, but I try. All right, I really appreciate it. One last thing. We had a lot of audience questions, but we don't have time for them. We only have one. This is from Boxeo Marshy. Who would you rather go out for a couple of pints with? Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, or Dana White?
Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, or Dana White? I would have to say Bob.
Yeah.
And it's not meant as a slight as the other two, but Bob has, a range of experiences going back to his days as a lawyer through some of boxing's golden era through today. He's got a really interesting perspective. He's obviously a very intelligent guy. We haven't always gotten along throughout the years, but that doesn't stop me from recognizing his history and his sport in the sport and all the things that he's experienced as part of it.
Yeah, you could charge for that. You could charge for that podcast. You two sitting at a bar
exactly.
at a bar stool. All right, Steven Espinoza, big schedule coming out, huge fights coming to Showtime. Always appreciate you chopping it up here on Inside Boxing Live. Thank you.
No, great to be with you, Dan.
Take care.